Hello, welcome back to Cusp of Coffee, the dental school podcast in which we discuss weekly the ups and downs of dental school. I'm Uwais Adam, a third year dental student.
And I'm Johan Klerk, a final year dental student.
And we've reached episode 5. Well done to us. 5 episodes of the podcast. It's been fun, and basically we decided that for this 5th episode we'll do something a little bit different. And so over on our Instagram pages we asked some of the people that have been listening to our podcast to ask us a few questions, about anything really. And essentially we got a couple of really, really good questions. And so we're just going to dive straight into them. I feel like they're really interesting and they very sort of tie directly into what we've been speaking about for the last 4 episodes. So the first question we have over here, essentially, we've kind of touched on it before, but I feel like it's really good to actually dive more into it. And somebody basically asked, how do you balance life outside of dental school, relationships, and obviously dental school itself? So, what are your thoughts on that?
I think they are. I think it kind of comes down a little bit to time management, but I think also it's maybe just like your approach to it. So I really like this idea that it's not always that you don't necessarily have enough time. It's just that something isn't high enough of a priority. So most of us by default tend to put dental school as like the number one priority, right? So then if something comes up and the option is between studying for this test or doing this assignment versus, maybe going out and seeing friends, especially over the years, the tendency is kind of to take the former option. And then all that basically is you're just making dental school a higher priority, which is fair. Obviously, you're in dental school, you want to get that degree. It took a lot of work to get there.
Hopefully.
So it wouldn't make sense to then not work hard at it once you're in dental school. But there is also, I think, a point of diminishing returns where every extra hour you're putting into dental school could maybe be better spent somewhere else. And when I was younger, I think, for example, first year, I think is a good example where at the end of first year, I finished top of my class, but at the same time, I basically had no friends. I was always stressed. I didn't have a lot of hobbies, but it's because I prioritized dental school completely above everything else. And now over the years, I've changed that a little bit where dental school is still very high, but I'm more open to saying no to putting in all this effort on this assignment or studying an entire week for this test, because I realized it's just a long degree and life is still going to happen along the way. So it doesn't entirely make sense to just kind of throw everything else away just to finish dental school, because there's no such thing as just finishing dental school. It's an entire 5, maybe 6 years if you're as smart as me, before before you're done. So I think for me it's a big thing of don't assume the default that of dental school being the most important thing in your life. Think about how important are these other things to you, and where are you okay with maybe putting dental school second,
Yeah. I feel like there's something somebody told me once that always it's been stuck with me for quite a while. It's that you have these sort of these little cookie jars in your life. So you have a few jars, and each jar is sort of gives you something in life, So, for example, you have the jar with maybe friends, and that gives you, fun in life. And then you have another jar with your degree or whatever you do for work, and that sort of gives you your fulfillment in life. Then you have your jar with maybe your relationship, and that gives you love or something like that. So you have all of these jars, but if you kind of start putting all of your chips into one jar, and you sort of put the pressure on that jar to fulfill you in every aspect of your life, whether it's fun, whether it's career fulfillment, whether it's relaxation, that jar is going to get too full and it's going to start spilling over. And it's all about like balancing it out. So yeah, you can be in dental school, you put like maybe a couple extra chips in there because it's very important and it's only for a few years. Well, it doesn't feel like a few years, but it's only for 5 years, maybe 6 for some of us. And yeah, so you want to like, you want to dedicate a lot of chips to that because you want to, do your best. But then at the same time, you can't be starving the other jars, Like, you need to be putting chips into that jar with friends because that gives you your fun in life, or something else, whatever. Like, everyone's jars are different, but the point is, like, you can't be overfilling one. I mean, the same thing goes for like relationships. Like, if you get into a relationship and you start filling that jar, spending all your time there, you start neglecting maybe dental school, maybe your friends, everything else, that jar becomes too full. And eventually you need to empty that out and even it out amongst everything. So I agree with what you're saying about time management. Like, the truth is, it's not like you don't have time. Like, we are very busy, yeah. Like, I mean, you're in the clinics all the time, you have tests all the time, but there is moments, there is a couple hours here and there, and it's all up to you to choose what you do with that time. And it's also about, like, I think what you said also, like, about deciding what type of student you want to be. I mean, for some people, it's extremely, extremely important that they get like 90% for every single test, a code 4 for every clinical session. And I mean, we can spend hours talking about whether that's healthy or not, but if that's important to them, they're going to have a very different approach to maybe what we're speaking about here, which is a more balanced way of, going about things. But
Yeah.
when it comes to like time management, do you have any like tips maybe for like, like not sort of burning yourself out?
Yeah, so I think in terms of like the practical aspect of it, there's like a few strategies that I make use of, but there's two that like I've really stuck with over the years, and that I think have made the biggest impact. So the first is it's an idea I came across in this book called Make Time by Jake Knapp, John Saratsky. It's super fascinating for like anyone interested in time management. It's two guys that used to work at like Google and YouTube. So their whole job revolved around like capturing people's time and attention. And then they were like, you know what, like we kind of want our lives back. And through that process of kind of just reclaiming their time and attention, they kind of wrote a book on like how to do that in like very practical ways. And one idea from that book is this idea of like the daily highlight, which is that in the morning when you wake up, you pick one thing you want to see get done that day. That, for me at least, my rule is that that thing shouldn't be dental school related. So every morning I'm like, okay, what's the one non-dental school thing I'm going to do today? It might literally just be as simple as replying to a few texts I've been meaning to get to, or maybe it's something like getting coffee or seeing a movie. It doesn't have to be big, but it's that one thing that's just you, that's not dentistry related. And if you do that every single day, you do that from Monday to Friday, by the time you get to the end of the week, you've kind of done 5 different activities that were just for you. And so I find that's a great way to just make sure that I'm always making time for life outside of dental school. And then the other thing that I always come back to, that I kind of coined the non-negotiable hour. So I have an alarm that goes off an hour before when I want to go to bed. And when that alarm goes off, any work I was doing, emails I was typing out, an assignment I was working on, like it all gets paused and shut down. And for that hour before bed, I'm just not allowed to work. So I'll do other stuff. I'll watch YouTube, or maybe I'll get my bag ready for the next day, or just whatever I want to do with that hour that allows me to just kind of chill out. Because I find that if you're working, and then you immediately go to bed, your brain is still working. And I think you don't rest as much. You get up the next day and it's like, oh, I need to be in the clinic in like however many minutes, and then you rush, you go to clinic, you start working, and then it just becomes like this vicious cycle, and it's very easy within that cycle to just lose your life. And like dental school just completely takes over. So those are the two things for me. It's the daily highlight. So like I said, making it a priority, and the non-negotiable hour where that hour before bed, I'm just not allowed to do any work. And that gives me a lot of like peace and solace, and just gives me a chance to breathe. We've talked about this a lot, where like dental school is much more of a marathon than it is a sprint. So if you're not gonna like rest up along the way, you're just not gonna make it all the way, you know. So those are like the two things I would say over the years that like consistently I've been able to actually stick to, and that I think have made a big difference in terms of like moving the needle between dental school and like actually having a life outside of dental school.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, like if you don't actually put those strategies or those tips into play, like it's not gonna happen. You need to sort of make that decision early on that you want to be balanced. I feel like for me, I sort of came into dental school kind of like, okay, so my first year was kind of weird because it was 2020, 2021, so it was like COVID still, and the entire year was online. And so that wasn't really like a start. Whereas 2022 was kind of like my first year where I was a proper dental student, because I was on campus every day and I was like, actually writing tests and doing things, And I feel like for me, in 2020, when I did matric, I kind of burnt myself out of studying so much that I kind of promised myself I'd never do that again. So I kind of like got to this point in matric where I was like trial exams, and I was studying so much because I was so like concerned that I needed to get like the best marks ever, because here in Cape Town there's like, besides UWC, there's nowhere else you can study dentistry, and I wanted to stay here and I wanted to study it. And so I kind of studied so hard, I kind of burnt myself out so badly. And then when it came to finals, I was still burnt out, but I like managed to push through, and I told myself never again. And so walking into dental school, I kind of already had made that promise to myself that I was never gonna like push myself to the point of burnout again, because I sort of just told myself, like, you need to push yourself now so that you can get into dental school, and once you get into dental school, you've made it. And that's just, I feel like I tell a lot of people that, like, when they, people end up competing with each other, and that actually ties into our next question, but people end up competing with each other, they end up stressing over small things, small tests, small little assignments that's really not going to make a dent in your record at all, or hinder your progress. And I tell them, like, that's the way I think about it, is you put in so much work to get here. Like, why are you stressing yourself to the point of death when you're already here? Like, yeah, you want to do well, but you're here. You made it. We all made it. So just do the best you can and prioritize yourself, because if you are not doing well, then there's no point, because you're not going to be of benefit to your patients, not going to be of benefit to your friends, your family. Nothing's going to work out because you're not treating yourself right. And the only way you treat yourself right is by dedicating time to yourself.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I feel like that idea of making it so obviously I work with like a lot of students that are still in grade 11, grade 12, kind of running them through the application process and all of that. But for a lot of them, like, just getting into dental school is like, once they're in, they've made it. But then once they get in, it doesn't take that long before the goalpost just shifts to, okay, once I'm a dentist, then I've made it. And so it becomes this thing of like, oh, I'll have a life, once I'm done with dental school, once I'm a dentist and I have money and stuff. But then I've seen with some other young dentists I know, you become a dentist and suddenly you have all these other problems. You have tax and there's money issues, and there's just all this extra stress that you now need to worry about, that you never had to worry about in university. And a lot of them were like, oh yeah, I kind of miss the dental school days. Like you had so much more flexibility back then. And that is, but like, you know, you take the average dental student and they're like, no, like this is prison, you know. So I feel like it kind of ties back to just that idea of like the fundamental delusion of like, once you reach a certain goal, suddenly your entire life will just sort itself out, which is just not true. Like life has no obligation to do that. So I think for me at least, ever since first year, when I was just like, you know, I was succeeding. Objectively, I was succeeding, but subjectively, I was just having a horrible time. After that, I was like, listen, man, like it takes a lot of effort to get up every day and go and do all this stuff. So I'm gonna try and optimize for like enjoying the journey. And yeah, it's just a thing. And I know this is just kind of tying back to what I said originally, but yeah, like think about, what are you optimizing for? If you're optimizing for being the best student that ever walked that hospital floor, flip and go for it, okay? Like just shut everyone out and just study, okay? If that is what you want and that is what's going to give you true fulfillment, then flip and go for it. Who am I to judge? But most of us aren't like that. And so you need to think about like, what are you optimizing for? So for me, what I was optimizing for is I want to grow as a person, I want to grow as a clinician, and I want to like try and actually enjoy the journey. And so I've kind of structured my life around that over the past few years. And I think this year especially, I've really hit a nice balance of all of that, because I know what it is I'm prioritizing for. So for example, if I get like a taste mark, the other day I got a taste mark back, dental materials, I got 54%, you know? And like you give that to first year Johan, I think he'd probably have a heart attack and die. But for me, I was like, you know what? Like that was a particularly busy week. I had a lot of like kind of rough stuff going on. And so during that week, dental materials wasn't very high on my priority list. So it makes sense that that is the mark that I would get, because what I was optimizing for at the time is like trying to just keep a smile on my face and like trying to get myself to keep going and to not just be completely like destroyed during that week. And so like, yeah, it doesn't actually matter what my mark was, because I wasn't optimizing for getting good marks that week. What I cared about was, oh, I was struggling with these procedures. How can I like get better at them, and how can I kind of get past my own ego as well of like, oh, I'm sucking at all this stuff, you know, which for me at the time was just way more important than like what's the curing time of this material, or like what's the component of that. So again, it just comes back to what are you optimizing for, and sometimes not optimizing for getting the best marks. I think like that doesn't make you a bad student. It means you're just a balanced person. So you know, it's a lot of it just comes down to choice.
No, I agree with you fully on that. Like I feel like most of us aren't the people that are like trying to be, you know, the best person that's ever set foot on that hospital floor. I feel like most of us are trying to have a balanced way of life. You know, like dental school is just one part of it. And kind of what we spoke about now kind of ties into like the next question we got, which was, I feel like something that I spoke to you about before, that we've spoken a lot about this, especially last year. And that's basically somebody asking, like, what are like our thoughts on comparing yourself to your classmates and like, you know, other students. I feel like this mainly happens when you're comparing yourself to people in your class, because you're kind of all doing something or learning a new skill at the same time, whether it's, you know, like for me, last year we were all learning how to do, you know, restorations. And, you know, the most common one that always happens is like lab work, because you're all doing the same lab work, but some people are just doing it way quicker than everybody else. Some people are banging out more quotas per day or more quotas per week than you are. Academically, that's the biggest one. I mean, that's the one we're all used to because we've had to deal with that since high school. There's certain people that are just, excelling academically, and sometimes they're excelling academically and clinically, and maybe you're struggling in one or even both of those aspects. And so it's very easy to compare yourself. And I feel like we spoke about this a lot, and I still sometimes get caught in this trap because I find myself thinking to myself like, I wanted to be here. I am here. I enjoy this. I should be the best at this. And without diving into the fact that we can't be good at it if we're still learning it, that kind of falls away because you're looking at somebody in your class that also hasn't done it before and they're doing better than you. And yeah, I mean, do you still you in final year? Do you still find yourself falling in that trap sometimes, or are you kind of like, have you kind of sort of like nipped that in the bud by now?
Yeah, I think for me, that is something I've made peace with quite a long time ago. So yeah, what I always come back to is just this kind of, it's called the equation of skill. It was proposed by a psychologist, I think Angela Duckworth. But basically, the equation goes that talent times effort equals skill. So if you want to be very skilled at something, there's two ways to go about it. Either you have a lot of talent, which you can't control for, or you just put in a lot of effort, which you can control for. So in that equation, the only variable that you have control over is the effort that you're putting in. You cannot control how much talent you're going to have. So in my case, I've always had very low talent when it comes to dentistry. When I look at my pre-clin days, I shudder. I used to be terrible. And I just really struggled. We've talked about this before. It's just, it's so difficult when you're doing something for the first time sometimes to just get your hands to do the thing that's like that your head wants it to do, that your brain wants it to do. But for some people, like that comes very naturally. Like it's like they know what they should be doing and they know what it should look like and they know what the outcome should be, and they just execute it, and they don't have hiccups, and they just have, and like that ability to do that just means they have a lot of talent. So because they have more talent than you, and because especially at the start you haven't been given the chance to put in more effort than other people, they're going to have more skill than you. That's just the fact. They're just going to be better at you than the thing. And at that point, like it's kind of a choice of like, oh, okay, so you just have to accept that I don't have a lot of talent in this thing, but I can just make up for it by putting in more effort than other people, assuming you want to be very skilled at the thing. Or you can make it.
There's also like, I feel like there's like an environment created where they reward, like people reward talent a lot more than they reward hard work. Because some person you might see, and sometimes it gets mistaken because you see somebody doing it really well and you assume that they're just like really talented, but you're kind of minimizing their efforts there. And I mean, you don't know any better, but ultimately that is not talent. Like it's hard work that they've put in. It's a lot of hours to actually get to that point. But that kind of again falls out because when you're in such a lower year or like a earlier on in your career, you're all at the same level of work. Like the first time you do something, some people are just going to be naturally better at it, and I feel like I'm the same like you. Like my hands don't naturally just work well for me. I shake a little bit here, I have a tremor here, it's just things you can't control, and it's like I need to put a lot more work in to be at the same level that some of these people that are just talented are naturally at. And it's again about making sort of peace with that. Like you either walk in and you feel defeated because somebody else did, like even in the preclinical days, like we were practicing restorations and there was somebody in my class that was doing like maybe, I mean, just a random example. If somebody was doing like maybe 4 restorations and we were supposed to do 2, I mean, they're doing 4 really crappy ones because it's their first time. But they just managed to manage their time to a point where they can do 4 crappy ones and I can do 2 crappy ones. And that doesn't mean they're better. It doesn't mean you should compare yourself to them. Whether they're seeing more patients than you, whether they're getting higher marks than you, whether they, filling more quotas than you, it's all like, it's all unnecessary stress you're putting on yourself, because at the end of the day, when they walk out of here, there are people that have done worse than them academically, that are going to be paid more, that are going to have bigger practices. I mean, I've met so many dentists that tell me like, damn, I didn't get any good marks in dental school. Like, I was on the brink of failure. And they're some of the most successful people I've met. They are making more money than like any other dentists I've met. They're doing so much. They're teaching. They are like out there teaching courses, running organizations, and they are the ones who didn't get a 90% for their pathology test. Like, that is a real life clear indicator that marks don't matter as much as you think it does. And so the same thing happens for comparison. Like, I can bet you like everything I own that when that person was in dental school, like, no one was comparing themselves to that person saying, oh, I want to be like that person. Because they were probably like, just like doing their thing. And somehow, because of their effort, because of their vision, because of their hard work, they're now at the top of their field. Who knows where the people that were quote unquote better than them in dental school are right now. And so my point is, like, you can't keep comparing yourself, because it's basically like a trap where you kind of fall into the trap where you sort of get stuck in that cycle, like you just keep doing the same thing over and over, comparing yourself. And you need to make that decision to just step out of that and focus on your own stuff, because ultimately, like, no matter how much you do everything together with people, the minute you step into that clinic and you have to do the work yourself, it's just on you. The person you are comparing yourself to is on their own, doing their own thing, and so it doesn't matter anymore,
So like what I was kind of saying at the start, the one choice is you make the choice to put in the effort, or the other choice is basically like what you described now, where you just look at the lack of skill you have compared to someone else, and you think like, how am I ever gonna close this gap? And all you're obsessed about is like trying to get to the other person's skill level. But like, your equations are completely different. Like, I mean, if you are starting off with like an insane amount of talent, and you're starting off with a very low amount of talent, like 1 month in, 2 months in, no matter how hard you work, the other person is still like gonna be better at you at the thing. And that's fine, because it doesn't matter who the best is. Or like, let me put it like this. It doesn't matter who's in first place for the majority of the race. All that really matters is like, where are you at the end? Like, are you going to finish at a place where you are happy? And if the goal for you is like to be number one and everything is a competition, then like, I have pretty bad news, because in the world of dentistry, there is always going to be someone that is better than you. The field is too big, too complex, too varied. I don't like, no matter how good you are at, say, veneers, someone's going to destroy you in endo. Someone's going to be way better at you than doing extractions. Like, there's no way to quote unquote win at dentistry. You just got to run your own race and decide where is it that you want to finish. And if you get there, then you've won. Like, you have successfully run your race. But don't try to run someone else's race. Like, it's not, like, in the world of running, that's literally not allowed. So like, why are you trying to do it? like in your career, where you're spending most of your time,
Yeah.
most of your effort. Like, it's a fool's errand. Just run your own race. It literally doesn't matter what someone else is doing. And I know we're kind of wired to compare ourselves around, we're kind of to compare ourselves to the people around us. But like, and this took me so long to understand. But honestly, if someone, if I struggle with a procedure, and eventually I get it done, I'm like, okay, whatever. And then I talk to someone else and they did that same procedure in like 30 minutes and they got higher marks than me. Honestly, who gives a shit? Like, why should that have any impact on the way I feel about myself as a person? And like, kind of how I view my skills. I know my skills aren't great, which means, by definition, someone else is going to be better. Because the only way for me to be like, oh, my skills aren't that good, is because I've seen people better than me. And if anything, that should kind of be a motivator where it's like, oh, so I can improve. Because here's this other person that, like, they don't have that much experience, but they're doing it better than me. So it's like, if I just put in a bit more effort, like, I can get there at some point. Like, it's fine, because you're literally seeing that it doesn't take 10 years to get there. If this person is already doing it right now, it means if I just put in a bit of effort to make up for the talent gap, I can also be there, which is like a really motivating thought. So, like, just to use a practical example, because I know some of this is like a bit, like, it is kind of me talking in the abstract, but to use a practical example, in 2021, I was the worst student in Prosto. Not the worst. I think I was like second or third last, but like, like, not very good. And I really struggled with all aspects of Prosto. It took me a very long time to really kind of intuitively understand the concepts, and just working with wax, doing like a jaw edge, taking an impression, it was just bad, man. For a very long time I struggled, and like, it was end of the year. It was like almost December. People were done. Me, I was still sitting in the lab. And, that's really when all this ideology starts coming into play, where it's like, okay, you say all these things, but can you actually apply it? And I mean, I'm sorry, when it's the 1st of December and you're sitting in the lab alone and you go on Instagram and you just see holiday pictures from all your friends, that's flippin' depressing. But in that space of sitting in the lab, I was like, good on them. Like, nice. Who gives a shit? Like, because it's not my story. It's not my race. Like, they are running their own races. And for me, like, the story I'm trying to tell and the race I'm trying to run, that involves flippin' getting through these denture cases and learning how to get better. Because for me, I want to be a great clinician. And so, like, that kind of idea of being great involves putting in a ton of effort, regardless of what the talent level is. So, fast forward, end of 2021, the kind of like module coordinator for Prosto comes to me the one day, and she was like, oh, I was just like looking through the clinical marks the other day. You're currently number 1 in the class. And, that's a full 180, but it's just because I put in way more time in the lab and way more time in the ward than almost anyone else that year. So, and because it was now like a year after, that talent gap has naturally decreased because we've all just had a way more experience. So coming into 2021, like, the gaps weren't as big anymore. Like, talent doesn't factor in as much. What starts to factor in the long run is effort. So if you can build those habits from early on, like not caring about other people's level of talent, just caring about your own level of effort, you can become better than them. Like, because at some point they will stop trying, and you're going to keep trying. So you will get better than them. So it's all just, a lot of it is in your head, but at the end of the day, what the person next to you is doing, as tempting as it is to like take what they are doing personally, just remember, like, don't give a shit about it. They are running their own race. You are running your race. So just like focus on putting one foot in front of the other. Like, if you're already struggling to keep up, why are you going to stay at someone else's feet? That's just a surefire way to trip and fall.
Yeah. Like, whether they know or not, they're not in competition with you. They're just doing their own thing. And, you know, like, no one wants to be that person who walks around asking people, what do you do? Or how did you do this? And did you finish this yet? Or am I on track? Or like no, like, just, like, you know, try and create your own bubble, you know, where you're just focusing on bettering yourself. Like, all this energy you're trying to put out, focusing on other people and focusing on what they're doing and how they may be better than you. Like, pull all that energy back and just, you know, like you did, like, spend more time doing things, spend more time practicing, spend more time reading up on things. And I feel like if you just do that, there's no way you won't get better. It's almost guaranteed you're going to get better. And something you said, like, by the end of dental school, everyone has kind of reached the same point. Like, you've told me, like, everyone's kind of clinically, you know, similar. You know, everyone's doing things adequately. You know, there's some people doing things better, some people doing things worse. But with all of the time you spend just doing things clinically, everyone kind of reaches the same point. And so, like, you know, it's like, take your time. You know, we're all boarding the same flight. It doesn't matter what time you get onto the plane, it's going to get you to the same place at the same time.
Yeah, that's actually such a good idea. I really like that phrasing. I'm gonna keep that. That's a funny story, funny tangent. So when I was flying to Cape Town, and you know, when we kind of recorded the first episode of this podcast, when Ash and I were waiting for the flight, there's like the priority boarding, right? Like the people that they get to get on the plane before you do. And I remember standing there, because I remember when we were booking the tickets, you could pay extra to get the priority boarding. And I was like, no, whatever. And when I was standing there, I kind of like redoubled my feelings on it. I was like, this is flippin' stupid. The plane leaves at the same time. It doesn't matter whether you're waiting inside the plane or you're waiting outside the plane flippin' leaves at the same time. I was like, this is the biggest waste of money I've ever seen in my life. And I just remember standing there just like losing my mind because I was just so stupid. I don't see the logic at all. And Ash was laughing at me because of how upset I was getting. But I was like, this is so stupid. Like, why? And now that you framed it like that, I was like, yeah, it's the same thing. With dental school,
It is, yeah.
We all, like, graduation is the same for all of us, you know. We all have the same requirements and everything we need to get to. Whether you meet those requirements in May or you meet them in November, like, it's not like you can proceed before then. So take your time, put in the effort, learn what you got to learn. Like, it's going to be 5, maybe 6 years for all of us. So the plane leaves for all of us at the same time. It doesn't, so, you know, like, it doesn't really matter how you get there, as long as you just get to your seat at the end of the day. So, yeah, that's a good way to think about it. Just do your own thing. Like, you'll get there eventually.
The only reason that people are doing that is because they see other people doing it. Like, besides priority, there are people that are standing up, queuing in the boarding line an hour before the flight is supposed to even board because they want to be first on the plane. And like, they're standing there, and I've seen it so many times, and I also get as frustrated as you get whenever I fly, and I see them standing there, bored, standing uncomfortably for like 30, 40, 50 minutes to an hour just to get on the same plane. And I'm just sitting there waiting. Like, I'll just wait. You know, when this queue is gone and everyone is on the plane, they probably settle down, pack their stuff away, and they're sitting comfortably. And I can just walk straight in to my seat, sit down, and then I won't have to sit on the plane and wait. The plane takes off immediately. Like, The only reason these people are standing there is because somebody else was standing there first. And they were like, oh, this person is standing there already. That means they're going to get on the plane before me. I should also stand there so I can also get on the plane before everybody else. Without thinking that it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. So all you need to do, again, don't fall into that sheep mentality. Like, think about why you're doing what you're doing. Like, why am I comparing myself to this other person? Why am I trying to run up at their level and keep up with them? It's not going to do anything for me. Just like getting on that plane an hour before we take off or 3 minutes before we take off. It's not going to do, okay, maybe 3 minutes is cutting it close. 5 minutes before we take off. It's not going to do anything for me. We're still all taking off or graduating at the same time.
Okay, so then to wrap things up, I also got a question on my side, which I thought was pretty interesting. Basically, the person just asked for like some ideas regarding either getting like a part-time job or starting a side hustle in dental school, and maybe like, yeah, just some suggestions with regards to what we've maybe seen other students doing or what seems to be like good ideas. And yeah, I think I kind of have like a small 2 cents on it, which is basically just like how urgently do you need the money, and also just kind of the question of like, do you need the money or are you just bored? I think if you are in a situation where maybe it's not really urgent and maybe you're just bored or you want to do something else, especially in the early years when you have a bit more time, honestly, I wouldn't really pick up a part-time job because, for example, let's say you do like waitering, and you get paid like minimum wage, and it takes like a few hours of your week or your weekend. You'd be much better served just spending those hours on something else. You'd get more of a return, maybe learning how to code, learning how to use a camera, basically just building like a skill that. And I always explain it like this way: what is like one thing that you wish you would have started a year ago? Yeah, maybe it's starting to learn the guitar, or maybe it's like more of a marketable thing, like I said, with like coding or learning about media, stuff like that. It's just like, what is something you wish you would have started a year ago, and then just do that instead of whatever the minimum wage job is, because it'll be in the long run a much more fulfilling use of your time. And then on the other end, I think like if the money is urgent, and it's like, okay, you really need this to like make your studies work, then yeah, I would say like try to get a part-time job, but also maybe see if you can get a part-time job with like that basically has the potential to allow you to kind of move up the ladder a little bit. Where let's say you've been working this part-time job for a year or two, hopefully by the end of the 2 years, you're earning more from that part-time job than say when you started. So that's just like, everyone's situation is different, but I think for me, that's kind of how I would try to think about that.
Yeah, I think I look at it similarly. I feel like it depends on your situation. If you need to get a job, obviously go and get a job. But if it's more like I want to get a job, maybe I want to work or something like that, I agree with you. Like, I think staying focused on dental school, especially at the start, definitely helps. And if you do want to do something extra with your time, then I would say the best thing to do is just shadow at dental practices, learn as much as you can, talk to people who are in the field. Maybe you can even get a job at a practice doing, I don't know, who even knows what, but just something that is related to dentistry, especially if it's something that you like. If you are very passionate about dentistry, you want to keep doing it like as long as you can, you're very interested in it, it's not just something you're studying. I think try and get a job that sort of, or try and do something with your time that relates to dentistry as well, because I feel like you'll learn a lot more. So yeah, I agree with you, it depends on the situation, but I mean, ultimately it's up to the person themselves to see where they want to go with their time and what they want to do. I do agree though with you also that if it's not a situation of you need a job, more like you want a job, like there are other things you can do with your time. Things that you could even monetize, learning a skill, like you said. There's so much things you can do that's better than maybe just going to work at your local burger shop or something like that. So, yeah. But that wraps up this week's episode of Cusp of Coffee, episode 5 wrapped up. I hope you guys have enjoyed this one, and good luck for the week ahead.
See you next week.